after a certain period of time in the finance industry, I started realizing that I was just an ignorant child that didn't know anything about financial literacy. I was born into a system. My parents didn't educate me. There was no financial talk. Everything's taboo. When it comes to money and talking about money in the African community, we shy away from it.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize a conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started.
From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented.
June 30 is just around the corner, and that means it's the end of financial year soon. To mark the moment, I'm offering something really special, 50% off my signature program, Represented. This is a program where I support online business owners on their racial awareness journey so they can build businesses that are intentionally inclusive from the inside out. And right now, we're not just navigating inclusion, we're navigating it in the age of artificial intelligence. AI can be a brilliant tool, but let's face it, it's not neutral. The more we rely on it to streamline our systems and support our content creation, the more we risk building bias into our businesses without even realizing it. That's why Represented now includes guidance on how to use AI ethically and inclusively, while still holding space for the heart of this work, racial equity. When you join by 30 June, you'll save $1,000. You'll get instant access to the pre-work module and be all set for the next round in October. So, if you've been wanting, or rather waiting for the right time to do inclusion work in a space that's been lovingly prepared with outstanding resources tailored to online business owners, this is your moment. All the details are at anigishuru.com/represented, and the link is in the show notes. Wow, I have just finished having such a wonderful conversation with Fabrice. His story, you are going to absolutely love it. First and foremost, he looks like LeBron James. Was doing my research and we had spoken before, so not seen him. And then when I was doing my research, came across his photo, came across him on his YouTube channel, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is LeBron's twin. So if you are not watching the YouTube channel, you need to come back and watch the conversation because LeBron's right there. Anyways, the conversation really revolves around him founding Black Wealth Connect. And one of the things that I mentioned as we are talking is the audacity to even call it that, because there is the shying away. As Black people, you would know if you're a Black person listening that we tend to shy away from calling things, Black, because you don't want to come across as though you're leaving out a certain group. But I love the response to why he named, the organization that. And then just going on and talking about financial literacy and why that is so important. And then building wealth and the fact that wealth is not just money, but wealth comes in different ways. And we talk about that. This is such a great conversation, whether you're in the corporate space, whether you are an entrepreneur, just around your mindset around money, literacy and the coming together, building community and growing. You are going to love Fabrice. Here is his bio. Fabrice Omankoy is the founder of Black Wealth Connect, which started in only 2022. But my God, they've made waves since they started. Black Wealth Connect is an Australian-based platform committed to empowering individuals of the African diaspora through financial literacy, leadership, education, creative arts, and the celebration of Black excellence. I love that so much. Fabrice has been in the finance industry for over 10 years and founded Black Wealth Connect to help bring community together regarding financial literacy. Without further ado, here is Fabrice Omankoy. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Represented Podcast. And today I am joined by Fabrice Omankoy. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
You announced it correctly. It's all good.
Okay.
I'm recording, yeah.
Um, I am so excited to have you here, brother. We connected just over about a week ago, and the connection was so strong when we had a conversation about the work that you're doing that I decided to have you on the podcast. And I just want you to share the amazing work that you're doing, especially with Black Wealth Connect. But before we even get there, Fabrice, I'd love you to take us back to perhaps the beginning, growing up, young Fabrice, and taking us to where you are today. And my question is, the industry you're in, finance, was that something that you had always wanted to be as you were growing up, or was it something that you just found yourself in?
No, awesome, Annie. Thank you so much. And look, it's an honor to be on your podcast. So first and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to jump on. And I do remember when we first had our conversation, the chemistry was really good, and it's a pleasure to jump on and share my story. So thank you for that. So look, where it started for me is so I originally from Congo. So my parents migrated to Australia in I think it was the 90s, early 90s, something around there. Or early 80s, sorry, early eight, mid 80s. Sorry. I'm getting all my time frames mixed around. But so when I came to Australia, so we originally migrated to Wagga. Which is like it's a rural area in Australia, and I grew up there up until I was about 6 years old. Then eventually we end up moving to Sydney.
Right.
So my story was, look, I've always been like a very competitive person. When I was growing up, I was always into sport. And I think that it was actually my older sister that got me into soccer. Because she was playing, and then obviously you get interested,
Yes.
seeing your siblings play
Hmm.
board, and then eventually you're like, look, I want to do that. So look, it was very fortunate because when I started playing soccer, I was actually quite good at it, to be honest. If you're not tooting my horn too much, my own horn too much, but it was really good because I was able to learn. I think as a child, sport teaches you discipline.
Yes.
Through discipline, I was able to, as I started growing up, I went and played a bit of professional football, and then eventually I ended up going to places like France, tried out for a couple of teams. So I went quite far. And going back to the discipline part, I think that really taught me a lot about how I was able to manage my life, and it also takes me to where I'm about to go in terms of like my position right now within the finance industry and all that. So I will always say that it really gave me the discipline to even be able to manage stuff like finances and things like that. And then eventually, look, so that was really my story growing up. My parents, they originally from Congo, they didn't know too much about financial literacy. So they're migrating here. They were caught into the 9 to 5 trap, not understanding anything about how interest works, credit cards, home loans, so that we all fell into the trap of not understanding financial literacy because them coming from Congo and not that's not the way they grew up, and then moving into a Western society. I think that was one of the things that obviously they didn't have access to. So my life is really like that. And then eventually my mum is the one that got me into finance because she was like, look, Fab, and because my curiosity was always around how do people own stuff like property, cars, and all that. So I was always a very curious child, as I said. So, and then eventually I got into banking because my mum's like, look, you should try it out. Went into banking. And then eventually, like, look, we're going on to nearly 12 years later. I've been in the finance industry. I've learned a lot and I've applied those skills into what I do today, which is Black Wealth Connect. So I'm happy to go into that unless you want me to stop there and we can.
No, no, no,
Quite
no.
a lot. It's quite
Listen,
a lot. Yeah.
wow. So you have a sporting background, and I love
Sporting back.
how you've said that the discipline that you got out of there. And it was only recently, Fabrice, I was listening to some people talk, and they were talking about sport, and they were talking about the difference between white people who get their children into sport and black families who get their kids into sport. And the difference is that with white people, they're getting their kids into sport so that they can learn the discipline. It might not necessarily be the skill or to go and become pro, but it's the discipline and the whole team atmosphere being around that. And with black families, it's like you gotta go pro, you gotta make it, you gotta, there's that push. And if you don't, then it's like you failed. You haven't amounted to much. So very two different mindsets there. And I find it so interesting that you said the things that you were able to take away and the strength of an African mother. Just hearing your mom saying, oh, look into this industry, get into this and pushing you and kind of guiding you along the way. That speaks a lot to, our ties as Africans and how we're brought up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, definitely. And I think it was, because my mum was always the person I felt as though was really interested more into financial literacy. My dad he's a business person,
Mm,
understands business quite well. But in business, I'll always say that my dad didn't have, sometimes you can be very skilled in understanding the way business works, but you don't have all the attributes, you don't know how to do spreadsheets, do
yep.
budgets and everything. We don't have everything, So my mum was always the financial literacy person wanting to know, look, buy your own house when you're younger, make sure you pay off things. So she was somebody that was really trying to push us kids to be able to own assets. So I think that's the reason why now when I think back is like, okay, get into banking. She encouraged the kids to get into banking and get into that finance industry for us to better our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was looking through Black Wealth Connect, and even just the name itself, I remember coming across it, quite a few years ago. And the first thing I thought, Fabrice, was the audacity. It
Yeah.
takes so much audacity to call it that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think in Australia, we tend to shy away when it comes to matters to do with race and
Correct.
specifically calling things what they are, black.
Correct. Yeah, yeah.
We tend to shy away from that. So talk me through how you came about founding Black Wealth Connect and even just having the courage to call it what it should be called.
No, I love that question, Annie. Thank you so much because I have been asked this a few times, and I love this question because it kind of gets me to explain to people why I came up with that name. But basically, I'll just start with the Black Wealth Connect and how it was birthed. So I made a lot of mistakes financially when I was growing up. Very, very ignorant mistakes. It's all about showing off. In the black community, we like to show off. We don't have our
Yeah.
finances correct, but we will rather show people that we can pull up with a BMW or we can pull up with a Mercedes Benz and look a certain way. But I quickly understood when I got into the finance industry that it was the opposite way around. So it's actually supposed to be that you're supposed to own, houses and assets, and then the cars and all that actually come later because you can use stuff like equity to purchase your car. So, we get taught the opposite way around, and I think it's just like a status thing because in our community it's all about status. So I quickly realized going into the bank that I had to change my mindset. So my mistakes and everything that I made, Black Wealth Connect was birthed because after a certain period of time in the finance industry, I started realizing that I was just an ignorant child that didn't know anything about financial literacy. I was born into a system. My parents didn't educate me. There was no financial talk. Everything's taboo. When it comes to money and talking about money in the African community, we shy away from it.
Yeah.
So I was just, yeah. So for me, it was just more around all the mistakes that I had made when I was younger. I took that, and then now I created Black Wealth Connect because I want to give back to the community, and especially give back to the younger kids with my knowledge in finance and my mistakes. I want to teach them about, when you go out and get stuff on Afterpay, what does it mean for you? When you take out credit cards, what does it mean for you at a young age? Because at a young age, there's so much temptation. You want to buy the nice phones. Look, there's an iPhone coming out every single year. Like, how can you keep up to the iPhone? You're taking out plans, you're taking out all this stuff. So it was really just to be able to teach the younger kids about like some of the mistakes that I made. And through that, I started a podcast, a financial Black Wealth Connect podcast, where I was talking to Black experts and people within the finance industry to give back their knowledge. So finance is, even though finance, there's, people always think about money, but there's so many parts of finance that we don't know, whether it's just a financial literacy part, whether it's, buying it all falls into the same thing, but buying a house, what does it mean? Deposits, all this stuff. So yeah, that's really why I started it, just based off the mistakes that I made. But the name itself, it's interesting because I actually didn't think about all this stuff. When I came up with the name, I was just like, what can I call it? Then it took me time. Originally, I named it Black Wealth Australia. And then I'm like, you know what? Like, I don't want to call it Black Wealth Australia because I want to make it a global thing.
Mm.
I want to touch more than just Australia, especially
Yeah.
if there's so many Black professionals around the world, how can I actually bring them together? So it eventually, the Black Wealth Connect actually means the black wealth of knowledge, because knowledge is shared. So it's not just money, right? Money is tied into black wealth, but then it's the wealth of knowledge that connects us. So it's Black Wealth Connect. And look, the black itself, I just didn't have any shame. I just said to myself, look, if I'm going to make a statement, I'm going to create something, it's going to be bold and powerful, and people are going to be able to recognize when I post something that it's black, it's going to hit them in the face. And at the same time, too, just quickly to wrap it up, it's like I do when I created Black Wealth Connect, I also opened it up for every race to come in and see what we're doing, because there's a platform. Even though, like, you look at Forbes, you look at all these things that exist, and then people are being showcased about their professionalism. I wanted to create something where people know straight away, if it's Black Wealth Connect, then they're going to connect with Black professionals.
Mm.
So it was just more about boldness. Yeah, I didn't really care.
Wow. Oh, so powerful. So,
Yeah.
so when did you begin this?
I started this in 2022, and it was just through having a conversation with my wife. And then we were bouncing ideas off each other. And then from there, I'm just like, oh, I'm going to call the first black person that I know that I've worked with for so many years. And I'm like, are you going to jump on this podcast? As soon as I shared to him the story, he was so in love with what I was trying to create. And it gave me that reassurance that, look, what I'm creating is something positive. And then from there, 2001, 2002, it kicked off. And then we did our first podcast in 2002 in May. 2002, 2003. What are we in 2003? No, I think 2003. Sorry,
Yeah.
2003. My
Yeah.
apologies.
And you've gone on, you've had summits, you're coming to your third summit, which we'll talk about in a little while. But before we talk about the wins and some of the things that you've experienced through, the couple of years that you've had the business, I really want to know what are some of the biggest hurdles when it comes to financial literacy within the Black community? What do you see as the biggest hurdle when it comes to equipping us to build wealth?
It's one of the biggest hurdles is, I got a mentor. His name is Fundikira Kipaya. I don't know if you know him, Annie. Actually, he's from, where is he now that I'm even forgetting where he's from? I think he's from Tanzania. He's Tanzanian, Fundikira Kipaya, and he's taught me a lot. And one of the biggest things that he made me realize, which also helped me to also understand, is that we lack trust. Trust is one of the biggest things that we lack. And that's one thing, yeah, one thing that I've realized that has not helped us elevate within the African space when it comes to business, right? Because it's all about trust. Because building wealth or building anything that can sustain over a long time is having the ability to be able to trust people. If we don't have that willingness to trust people, whether it's in business or whether it's just in general across the board, then we're never going to be able to build anything.
Yeah.
So that's one of the biggest things, one of the biggest hurdles. I feel like once we're able to get over that trust, because everybody makes mistakes, right? Anyone can rip off anyone. It's not just a color thing, right? You can go somewhere and feel like you've had bad service. It doesn't just come from our community, it comes from many communities.
So,
So, yeah.
do you think the lack of trust comes from perhaps the belief that if you are a certain race, you're viewed less favorably than somebody of a different race? Is that the thing? Is it?
Yeah, no, it's good. I think it's just been embedded into us, like, I mean, even when I was growing up, like my
Mhm.
parents were they're always like, oh, we don't trust these people, we don't trust these people. It's a generational thing, it's
Yeah.
generational trauma. That trauma is
Mhm.
embedded into us, at an early age. So yeah, so it stems from our parents' generation, which then it gets passed on. And eventually, if my parents are telling me, oh, don't trust this person, don't trust this person, and they look exactly like me when I was
Mhm.
young, so everybody that's going to look like me growing up, I'm just not going to have that trust in them. So that's where I think it stems from.
That is so powerful, a trust thing.
Yeah,
And I think that is so true, Fabrice. When I sit down and I really, really think about that, trust is a factor because when I'm thinking about collaborations, when I'm thinking who would I like to bring on board or do something, there is always an element of can I trust that person? Will they show up and deliver? Will they do what they're meant to do? Just because of, again, generational trauma. But also coming back to a conversation that you had, I listened to your conversation with, was it Dr. Omar?
yeah, Dr.
Um,
Uma Johnson. Yeah, yeah,
oh my goodness.
yeah. Very powerful speech.
That conversation, like I need to go back and write notes.
Yeah,
But when he said about the fact that we don't build generational wealth as Black people is because where we struggle is because we're not proud of who we are.
yep,
Is this shying away from who we are? We'd rather spend our coin, our dollars, our shillings, whatever it is, our currency, uh, outside of who we are. And in
exactly.
doing that, we are building wealth for somebody else and not necessarily us. And I think it does come down to trust as well.
Exactly. You're absolutely spot on. I mean, like all that stuff, because when I actually got taught that by Fundi Kira, I started just looking at the way I was even navigating my own life and how I was looking at my own peers that are within my community, when it comes to business. And I was doing things because I started asking myself, why do I feel more comfortable, um, you know, being like when there's a white person talking to me and they're offering me something, I feel more comfortable
Yeah.
when it's coming from them rather than people coming from my own community, because I always feel like, oh, you're gonna screw me over. I
Yeah.
always, and you know what I mean? And that was it, like I said, that's been embedded in us ever since I was younger. So I think it's just about changing the mindset. And I think that what Dr. Umar said was very powerful, because it's like, there's a lack of us loving ourselves. Why is it that we look outside of our community to get validation? Like, we have everything within our community. And I think that comes back to Black Wealth Connect,
Mhm.
why it's like we don't need to go outside of our community. It's not like a race barrier thing, but it's like we have all the services in our
We
community. And
do.
every other community does that. There's nothing wrong with it. I look at, for example, the Pakistan community. I work in finance. They're very dominant in that space. They're very, if they want to buy a house, they tend to, and this is for people that are that are into the property world, but if they tend to buy a house, they will do their finance through a Pakistani person, and then from there there'll be a Pakistani person that does the valuation when it comes to the value. So it stays all in-house, and that's the way they manage their things. So I think to Dr. Umar's interview, it was amazing to hear him talk because it just showed how much of a lack of trust we have towards each other. And that's why you see that we're staying more stagnant than other communities.
Mm. And so, what do we then do to build that trust? Because as much as we do feel how we feel about the lack of trust or not being proud about our heritage, I also feel like it has also been confirmed. You have either worked with somebody who has let you down,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
has, screwed you over, and you're like, I knew this was going to happen. And so it kind of confirms it. And I remember even when I lived in Perth, where there's a huge Kenyan community, you put events together and people don't respect time. Something as
Oh,
simple as time, Fabrice.
yeah.
The event begins at midday.
Yeah.
People are not there at midday. It's an African event, and you're like, it starts even weddings, something as important as a wedding. But if it is a white Australian event
Oh,
that is
yeah.
beginning at midday, if it is a wedding that you're attending for a white person, you will be there on time.
Exactly.
So it is experiences like that that just let you down.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
you're like, I don't know what it is with our community. We just don't take each other seriously. There isn't
Correct.
professionalism. And so when you're thinking, okay, I'm going to branch out, I want to collaborate with this person, there's that hesitation. Unless I know you personally and I know you to be professional, and that when I say that this podcast starts at this time, you will actually be
Yeah, yeah.
on the other side at this time, or I will call you at this time and you'll be there. Um, we let ourselves down in that way. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, look, I think we've all had that experience, right? We've all had that. And I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say that I haven't fallen into that trap multiple times. I've had weddings. I've rocked up when it's 12 o'clock and I'm getting there at 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
We always almost don't want to be the first. We don't want to be the first people showing up. We want to come in and show people. It's all about status. But that's what my mentor always tells me. It's all about status. It's like when we walk in, we want people to see us. We don't want to be the first people there. So it comes back to a status thing. But I think to your question about like what can we do to change it, I
Yeah.
think it's just really all about mindset. It's like, okay, so we need to it all comes back to, like I said, loving ourselves too. Like, I mean, the way we show up for other communities, we need to show up for our own community. That's discipline.
Yeah.
And discipline is something that we need to take more serious. If you're raising a child, or the values that you're teaching your child and things like that, you also need to be able to carry the same values. So it's the values that are in our community that we need to take more serious. And I think really it just comes down to the individual themselves,
Mhm.
like how serious they want to change things. I always say this, and like, you can't change everyone. And I think I've come to the point where I've realized that. But as long as if you're building a business or you're building a foundation, sometimes like I've had conversations about, oh, let's take everybody with us, but we actually can't. I think it just comes
Mhm.
down to finding the people that align with your values, that are taking things serious. And even if it's just 4 out of 100 people, you start off with those 4 people. And that's what I've come to realize. But you can't control everyone, even if you educate them, you teach them about coming on time, doing all these on time. Like, it's just something that you'll probably go mad trying to teach everybody.
Mhm.
But as long as it's just a small group of people, I think that's where it starts off with. And then over time, you start to that starts to become something that kids will then look up to and see that you're doing certain things. So yeah, that's
Yeah. Oh, that is so sound. You cannot change everyone. You cannot bring everybody on the journey. But
correct.
those who are willing and those who align with you, then bring them along, and hopefully, generationally, it does begin to change.
Correct.
Um, I wonder, what are some of the things, obviously starting Black Wealth Connect, what are some of the things that you have witnessed and you've been like, wow, that's been a win, or that has given you hope, or you've been like, this just fuels me to keep doing this. What are some of the wins that you've witnessed?
I think one of the biggest things is the community showing up, you know? Like I think that when I started this, I didn't, you know, we all have I've always been somebody that is willing to try things even if it fails. Like I've always had that mentality ever since I was young. Like I'll give it a go. If it
Mm.
works, if it works, if it fails, then it fails. But I think when I started this, I had so many people tell me that, oh, you know what, like, oh, black people are not going to show up. They're not going to do this, not going to do that. If I listened to every single person that had told me that, I'll probably be a billionaire if I got a dollar from, you know, every person that told me that. And I think it was just about like trying to change the narrative. So I think to answer your question, it's really about like how people showed up for the conferences that gave me the willingness to keep going. It fueled me, you know. People were really, you know, they were very engaged in the summit. You know, it wasn't just one of those things where I felt like people were showing up just to be seen. They actually wanted to learn. And looking around the room and people writing on their pads and papers, and you know, people really, you know, gravitating to the workshops that we had. That fueled me. And then on top of that, when we started doing the women's summit too, which we did last year, people also showed up for that too. So it just showed me that like there was a very big gap in that space that needed to be filled. And you know, about financial literacy, and people in our community actually do want to learn. That's what actually gave me that extra hope, that it showed that people are showing up, people are listening, people are writing things down. And I think that's what really gave me the inspiration to keep going through. Yeah.
Mm. You know, I was watching the last one that you hosted in 2024, and you have one coming up again in June, the
Yeah.
28th of June, Saturday, the 28th of June in
Correct.
Sydney.
Yeah.
Um, the caliber of speakers, Fabrice,
Yeah.
goodness,
Yeah.
incredible,
Yeah.
highly intelligent people who know their stuff, but also so inspiring. You almost want to fling open the doors and just let as many people as possible have access to this because of just the wealth that is in there. And as you said, wealth of knowledge. It's not just wealth as in finances,
Correct.
but
Correct.
there's just so much to take away. How do you come across these speakers? Is it just through networking? Is it people you know or recommendations? Because there were just so many amazing speakers, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I had access to listen to the whole entire, talk.
No, I love that. Thank you, Annie. That's a very good question. And it comes back to trust. You know, I had to build trust with all these people. When you can imagine, Annie, when you start something and you reach out to our community and be like, look, I'm doing this thing. A lot of people would never think that that's capable, you know, like, and I don't say this as a, you know, because I want the viewers to know that this is not something I'm saying to like toot my own horn or something, but I had to build a lot of trust in the community to get these
For sure.
speakers, you know. And I had to show my credibility when I said I'm going to pay you, when I said I'm going to do this, I'm going to pay you on time, I'm going to do this, because my mentor always told me, like, go back to trust. If you lose that trust at the very beginning, or you lose
Mm,
that trust in any step of the way, then your credibility is gone. And with us, we don't, with our community, we don't have too many chances to build
that's
that
right.
credibility. One person gets, you know, bad service, it's going to spread around, you know. So I was always very conscious of that. And I said to myself, if I'm going to build something, and even my wife is always telling me, you know, you should pay these people from the beginning. And you know, and because it helps to, even if I don't earn a penny, if I don't, like, you know, gain money from it, or I break even or whatever, but it's just to build that credibility within the
Yeah.
community. And over time, people start talking like, oh, you know, I worked with Fab, he was able to do this, he delivered on his promise. And then from there, you start seeing that when I reach out to somebody like a Yemi, or I reach out to somebody
Mm,
like a Kemi or someone like that, because they're very respected speakers, amazing black women women that are doing incredible things in this space. You can only get people like that if you build credibility. And that's what I encourage to, the African community. If you're trying to build something and you want our community to be involved, it's all about trust and credibility, and people will show up for you if you stay true to your word.
Oh, I love that you are, you're not just talking the talk, but you're walking the walk when it comes to trust. That is so true. And especially when it comes to, because within our community, we don't necessarily pay our people.
Yeah.
It's oh, you just come, the exposure will be so good for you, Fabrice. You just come
Yeah, yes,
and you just do this. Or they do say they will pay you, but the process is like, oh my gosh, I did this gig, these people didn't pay me, and just the having to go back over and over, it just leaves you feeling misused.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so the fact that you've gotten that right, and the fact that you have, mentors or people who are supporting you and advising you says a lot about the excellence that you have built with the brand that is Black Wealth Connect. So tell us a little bit about what will be happening on Saturday, the 28th of June in
yeah.
Sydney. If you're in Sydney, pay attention. Even though you're not in Sydney, if you're in Australia,
I'm,
pay attention.
I know I'm talking about Sydney, and I live in Melbourne, but no, I grew up in Sydney. And what's happening on the 28th is look, it's by the grace of the spirits above, I've been able to have my third year for the summit. It's very inspiring, and I think it's a day of networking. From the beginning, it's always been a place where people come and they nothing but good words from the summit. People feel comfortable. People are able to learn, network. Some people don't even realize that there's that many people that they can connect with professionally in Sydney. So just being able to create that space. So that's really what's happening. It's going to be a web. It's going to be not a webinar. It's going to be it's going to be an event that starts from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Doors open at 9, and the conference starts at 6 at 5. Sorry. The conference starts at 10 a.m. And basically, the day is just going to be full of amazing speakers. There's going to be three keynote speakers, one talking about property, one talking about leadership, and then the other one's talking about Aminata, talking about her journey and where she came from and how she was able to break from the refuge, the refuge camp and all these things. So it's going to be a very inspiring day. Workshops around financial literacy. Then there's going to be not podcast. There's going to be a panel full of amazing speakers. So really, it's just a very impactful day. And yeah, if you're around, please come through. Anybody that's listening to this, and and look forward to seeing you there.
Mhm. Highly, highly recommend. These are things that are gems for our community. We don't have access to events like this. They're so
Yeah,
rare. And
yeah,
so when they're available, do everything you can to be there and be in that room, because sometimes all it takes is just being in the room,
yeah,
being in that energy, and you don't know what it can do for you personally to ignite you, whether it is within your career in the corporate space or your entrepreneurship, whatever it is, just being in the room with people who are inspiring, people who are making things happen. There's an energy, shift, there's an energy exchange, and you just have to be in that room.
yeah,
And Fabrice, it's not just the summit, it's not just the podcast.
yeah,
You've built a community, you have a membership. Talk to me about the other elements that
yeah.
are part of Black Wealth Connect. And I know you've got some merch as well.
Yeah, yeah, I've got the whole lot, and yeah, but no, I love you. I love that you did your research to make. No, look, so so we have the membership program, which we're still in the look. It has launched, but we're just restructuring some things at the moment. So we're also in the process right before the summit. There's going to be the Black Wealth Connect Hub, which is a directory. So the directory is actually going to be something where all the businesses in Australia or globally, we want to start off more with Australia able to
Yeah.
list their businesses there if you're a black owner. And through that, if people are looking for different services, whether it's health, food, all that, it's all going to be on the Black Wealth Connect hub. And then it's going to be a directory depending on which state you go to. So if you're in New South Wales, you can see all the restaurants, the health industries owned by black people, and that's going to be launched before the summit. So that's called the Black Wealth Connect Hub. And then we do have the membership program, which we're restructuring. But the membership program is going to be designed because we're putting together financial literacy courses. So people are able to get access to courses. If you're just starting your business journey, there's going to be courses that cater to business startups, how to save, budgeting. So there's really going to be all that stuff around financial literacy and education. Not even just that, right? There's going to be things like personal development. There's going to be everything that is connected to mindset, because in order for you to be able to gain wealth in any capacity, your mindset needs to be on par. You need to be able to think a certain way, feel a certain way. We're even going to get into the health industry about, running and fitness and all that stuff, because that all ties into your mindset. So yeah, big stuff in the membership program. Yeah.
Ooh, that sounds incredible. And one of the things that I love to ask my guests as we wind down now and get to the end, um, if fear wasn't a factor, Fabrice, how do you think you would show up more for your work or in your work?
If fear wasn't a factor,
Yeah, like
how
if
would
you
I?
removed fear, if fear wasn't there, you're not feeling like, oh, can I do this? Or, oh, this is so bold. How do you think you'd show up?
It's a very good. Oh, well, that's a good question. How would I show up if there was no fear? Um, I think I will probably be, me personally, I will be relentless because I already operate. So don't get me wrong, I already think about things that are going to go wrong when I start it. So there's that element of fear. But
Yeah.
if that just was not a part of me, oh my God, I'll probably be starting a business and doing things every day. So I need to. So I think to, in response to that, I think fear also helps you navigate your some decisions that you make in a positive way, even though fear can be looked at as like a negative thing. But I think sometimes having fear also allows you to make conscious decisions.
Mhm.
But if I did not have it, then definitely I'll probably be starting 50 businesses. I'll be out of control and I wouldn't know what I'm doing. So yeah, so
It's such a, that's such a good spin of how fear can help, how fear can act as an aid for you. Somebody who's listening, who's watching, they're like, gosh, how did Fabrice get there? I've had this idea, I've had a dream to do something, but I still haven't stepped into it, or I'm doubting myself, or I'm in the corporate space, but I'm really very, very much wanting to do something, but I'm holding back. What advice would you have to that individual who's listening, but they still haven't taken that plunge?
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think fee's a good thing. I don't think I've never looked at fear like a negative thing. I think that whenever you're starting something, it's okay to operate off a place of fear because but it's just how you use the fear. Like, so for example, my advice would be to people that are starting businesses that have that fear, that fear factor, or just are thinking about, oh, if I do this, it's gonna fail. I think you just need to understand that there's millions of people in this world that are starting businesses that are gonna fail. But you need to have that mindset that, look, okay, what is this fear doing for me in this moment? Is it just stopping me from being able to start to create a logo? Is it because it's how you got to understand where the fear is coming from, because some people have different elements of fear. Some people are like, oh, I'm ashamed with how people are going to look at my business, or I'm ashamed with what my family is going to think about me, or tap into whatever that fear element is, and
Mhm.
then look for ways to, even if it means that you need to speak to people, like, get a mentor, get somebody to help you overcome that stuff, because sometimes people can't do that on their own, and that's okay. So my advice would be, if you're feeling like that and you have a good idea, maybe reach out and speak to somebody that get guidance. There's people online, there's counselors, there's people, and then from there you can figure out how to manage that fear for you to achieve great things. Because even people like all your celebrities that you look up to, or people that are doing major things in the world, they have a lot of fear. They're anxious people. I know people, and I don't mean to ramble on, but I know people that are very, very successful that still operate off fear. They got millions of dollars and they're still fearful. So if that's somebody that's successful that operates off fear, and then you're not successful yet, but you're operating off of fear. So you got to understand that everybody has fear, but it's just how you are able to manage that fear and overcome it.
Wow, absolutely. That is such sound advice. That is really solid.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Now, where can people connect with you? Where is the best place? Somebody has heard what you're doing. They're like, oh my goodness, I gotta connect with Fabrice. Where can they get in touch?
Yeah, look, I'm easy to get in touch with. My Instagram is just Fabrice Omankoy. So, I mean, if you just Fabrice, Fabrice, and then my surname Omankoy, Omankoy. So that's me directly. You can just hit me up in my DM. I'm quite responsive on that. And then Black Wealth Connect page. So that's instead of the black being spelled black, it's BLK. I wasn't able to get the Black Wealth handle because somebody already owns it in the US. So I was too late. But it's okay. It's worked out. So
Yes.
BLK Wealth Connect. That's all one word. That's the Instagram. And then even if you just type it in on Google, you'll be able to see that, like, we're able to, yeah,
I'll have that in the show notes, so don't worry about spelling or
it's
whatever. You'll be able to click on it on the show notes and go and follow Fabrice, follow Black Wealth Connect, but more importantly, make time on the 28th of June to be in that room with change makers.
Also, I want to say, Annie, thank you so much. Like with all the incredible stuff that you're doing, I think that, us as podcasters, or, we always tend to, I'm not used to being interviewed. I love it. I actually personally love it. So when you reached out to me, I really appreciate it. And I appreciate sharing my story. And the stuff that you're doing is incredible, the work that you're doing. So a big shout out to you. And honestly, I look forward to catching up with you sometime, and doing some work alongside you, and building something together. So thank you again for today. I really appreciate it.
You are so welcome.
Thank you so much, Annie. Take care.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a review so this podcast can reach more online business owners, and together we can begin to normalize racial inclusion in the online coaching space. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where this podcast episode was recorded, the Wiradjuri people in central New South Wales, Australia. Music produced in Nairobi, Kenya by Patrick St. P. Mbaru and Kambua Mathu. Vocals by Joanne Matata.
Represented.